We should be live on ROKFIN. Our special Johnny Depp reporter, among many other things, FBI, whatever you want to know, you can ask Christina. She may even give you love advice at some point if you're in the live chat. So she's back because Christina has been covering the Depp trial, which lasted, I swear, longer than my last pregnancy, with my daughter, who is sleeping right now, and hopefully she is going to stay asleep during this. But we all know she's the producer, so anything can happen. But Christina, thanks for coming back on, because you're one of the people who was actually in the courtroom. There are a lot of people that this verdict comes out, they're out opining about it from a legal standpoint, and you have been like front and center in it. And yeah, we were talking yesterday about how you're like proud of the jury. And so I wanted to ask you first off, why are you proud of the jury? And could you just tell everybody who's totally missed out on like what's happened, what happened? What was the verdict, and bring us up to speed?
Okay, yeah. So it was a long process. 6 weeks, guys. That's pretty wild here in Fairfax County, which was so strange to begin with, right? For people who are not familiar with the entire thing, a basic rundown of this is Johnny Depp and Amber Heard had their divorce in 2016. At that time, she obtained a restraining order against him. Videos made their way to TMZ and things like that. And then in 2018, she published an op-ed via the Washington Post with help from the ACLU. And she did not name Johnny Depp specifically, but the implication is that that is who she was referring to in her op-ed. So Johnny Depp brought a defamation suit against her for $50 million, saying that this article defamed him. Virginia happens to have defamation by implication, and that is where the servers for the Washington Post are held. So that's how he was able to bring this defamation suit against her. She ends up countersuing him for defamation also for $100 million because his attorney, Adam Waldman, made some statements in 2020, which she claims defamed her. Those statements were things like, Amber Heard brought this abuse hoax to the public. And it was Adam Waldman that made the statements, but Amber argued in her counterclaim he was doing so on behalf of Johnny Depp, basically speaking as an agent for Johnny Depp. And so after 6 weeks of looking at all of the evidence and having Amber take the stand as well as Johnny Depp take the stand, the jury basically found in favor of Johnny Depp. They awarded him $15 million, but they also found that one of the Waldman statements was defaming Amber Heard, where he said something very specific. He said that Amber, under the direction of an attorney and a PR representative, concocted the false allegations of domestic abuse and staged a crime scene. And so they found that that was basically Johnny Depp defaming Amber Heard in a very specific way. So they gave her a $2 million in damages. Now, the damages for Johnny Depp was $10 million and then $5 million in punitive damages. And there is a cap on that at $350,000. So what it would come out to be, minus the $2 million that she got, is that she would end up having to pay Johnny Depp around $10 million. And so I'm proud of the jury because I was there in the courtroom. It's a long proceeding. It's very boring. You're sitting there.
Some days, because there were other days where it was covered. We're like, wait, what did they just have to listen to?
Yeah, there were some days that were more exciting than others, but there were a lot of these long video depositions. They can be incredibly boring. Like, we had a property manager from the East Columbia building do this video deposition, and it was one of the most boring things ever. I was sitting there trying to stop myself from falling asleep because it was at the end of the day. But after going through that for 6 weeks and coming out with what I think was an appropriate verdict, I think they did very well. And knowing also that this thing had, during the course of the 6 weeks, turned into a media circus. From day one, specific publication, Law and Crime, was taking things that were said in the opening arguments by Amber's attorneys before any of the evidence had been introduced, and they were basically running with it as fact. And one of their reporters said, it's time for Johnny Depp to be held accountable. And I just think that's so inappropriate as a so-called journalist to be opining like that on something when we haven't even seen any of the evidence yet. That they were doing that at the very onset of this. And so, through the course of the trial, it became very clear that both of these people were toxic. Both were abusive in their own way. But as far as physically abusive, Amber very clearly was the one on audio tapes admitting to hitting Johnny Depp, and she was the one that seemed to be the one that would engage in these physical fights. And the allegations that she came up with were very serious. They were criminal in nature. And I've had people who have reached out to me, real victims of DV and SA, and have said what she did was so shameful. And, it's insulting to real victims.
It's also interesting, too, to me. And you know what? I'll ask you this question again later, because I want to go to the censorship stuff real fast before we even get to that. But just keep this in mind. For me, it seemed kind of odd. Like, the money doesn't, it doesn't seem like the money was what he was doing this for. It also seemed very weird that, like, he would even want, some of this stuff was really damning for both of them. Yeah. And it just made me think, gosh, things must have gotten really bad for Johnny Depp for him to think this would be a step up, like that this was going to be a sell. Because a lot of this stuff was like really dark, personal, yes, garbage, basically, that you would want thrown out, not necessarily for people to be digging through. And curious about your thoughts on that in a second, but let's just jump real fast to how the heck is this in any way connected to calls for censorship? You see this tweet: political figures are trying to pass laws ensuring Johnny Depp versus Amber Heard cannot happen again. It's literally happening now. They're using mainstream media talking points to ensure male domestic abuse survivors can be silenced again. And the tweet that they're showing here is the impact of influencer culture on our consumption of news is something that urgently needs to be taken into account in the online safety bill. As things stand, misinformation and media literacy are glaring omissions from the legislation. What is this online safety bill, and what the heck does this have anything to do with Johnny Depp?
Yeah, talk about Orwellian, right? Just look at the language there. And by the way, she has deleted that thread, but she's an MP in the UK. The online safety bill is something that they're pushing now to basically silence regular people. You're not going to be allowed to talk. You're not going to be allowed to have a voice. And they're going to be prioritizing essentially like mainstream media journalist talking points. And what they're using is they're jumping on the Johnny Depp Amber Heard thing and the social media presence, right? There were a lot of people that for some reason were very invested in this trial for one way or another, whether it was male victims who were finally felt like they had a voice, right? Or whether it was real victims of DV and SA that were upset about somebody who they feel is damaging to them. A lot of people had a lot to say about it on social media. And so we now have legislators in the UK, for example, who are saying, okay, we need to stop that from happening again, from these hashtags that are able to go viral, and for regular people to basically be able to have a say. There's conflation of words with violence, and people having an opinion on something. They're now calling it misinformation. Oh, they just didn't have all of the facts or whatever, which is absolutely ridiculous. They're saying you have to interpret something in a certain way and you have to believe a specific narrative, and just sort of politicizing something that was, quite frankly, a marital issue that had been going on for years, and trying to turn it into this Me Too thing. And a big cultural thing. And now we need to condemn everybody that was able to have an opinion on the internet. And as we'll see, You have now people from NBC and CNN saying, like, YouTubers, they're very upset that there are TikTokers and YouTubers who went viral talking about and covering the trial in a way that they didn't like, that went against their narrative. And really, I think they see as competition to them.
Well, did you think because of the stories they were writing early on that were very, like you said, they were sort of entrenched in the Me Too, pro Amber narrative, and then a jury decided differently, and so I don't know. It's like their way of not having to reckon with the damage that they cause by
Yeah.
is just, well, if we just get rid of of the people who make us look bad. I don't think they
Yes.
necessarily think it that way. I think they really
No.
have convinced for whatever reason that somehow they're either not they're not incorrect. Somehow they've done the mental gymnastics to think that they still are right, or that their incorrect statements are somehow less dangerous or less concerning than just an average person saying something like that.
I think they see themselves as sort of like information or cultural warriors.
Yeah.
Like, they think they're defending democracy and all of this goofy stuff. So to them, I think that they truly believe that they're right in the way that they see everything. I think they have a very bizarre worldview where they are, the ones that should be the arbiters of stuff. Like, they'll look at a subject, they'll all get their talking points, and I think they believe that they're in the right. I think they think that they are correct, and that this has to be a cultural social justice issue or something like that. And I think that's how they sort of justify to themselves. I mean, really, when you exist inside an echo chamber, and I think many of them do, where they only follow other people who think exactly like them, they're not getting really exposed to any kind of counter opinions. And when they do, it's from YouTubers or regular people, and they assume these are regular people. They're not educated like us. They didn't go to journalism school, so therefore they couldn't possibly understand things the way that we do. We have special training. It's grandiosity in the extreme, but I think that they truly believe that they're the educated ones, they're the managerial class, and that regular people shouldn't be allowed to opine on things because they must be getting it wrong. And they'll even convince themselves that when it comes to lawyers on YouTube talking about this stuff. Like, you're not a lawyer, you are not an expert on the law, you're a journalist, and yet somehow they manage to convince themselves that they know more than a psychologist, a psychiatrist, a DA or DV, expert, an attorney. They know better somehow, just like with COVID, they know more than doctors and medical professionals, and they can silence ones who don't agree with them, and they can elevate the ones who do.
Right. Yeah, no, and I'm going to show a couple of other news stories that you were bringing up for people. But first, what time it is. It's 5:00 somewhere. So if you are anti-censorship but pro allowing people to drink amazing wine, then you should go to AllisonWinePromo.com and pick up some of my favorite Malbecs from Argentina. 2 of these bottles from almost 9,000 feet, high altitude. When you get up that high, maybe you don't even care anymore about Johnny Depp and Amber Heard, or maybe you still don't. And that's why you should just go get some wine anyway, because it won't matter. It will not influence your perception of the trial because you just don't care. But anyway, go to AllisonWinePromo.com. Keep me in business, having people who are way smarter than myself, like Christina, on. And like I said, 50% off the wine itself, 50% off shipping. One uses natural fermentation, one from the oldest vineyard in Argentina. Can't get this stuff at the grocery store. Hopefully they won't be censored soon, and it keeps me on these platforms. So I appreciate everybody's support, especially those of you who are members over on Locals or you're subscribed on ROKFIN. Thanks for the support. All right, so let's go back to Christina. And actually, I want to give Christina a plug too, because she's at Radix Verum on Substack, right? And people can subscribe over to you. You do some of the best reporting out there. You will not find anyone who covers some of these topics seriously, like you did the FBI Michigan kidnapping plot. We covered January 6th extensively. You do some of the best reporting out there, so I can't recommend you highly enough. Okay, I want to go to the other tweet that you were showing me from the same guy, because I don't know if this is just an extension of what we were talking about earlier, but
Yeah.
so this guy writes, yeah, this isn't aimed at YouTubers or LawTuber social media accounts. It's aimed at specific folks like myself. Incredibly average Laura B, because we dared to talk to Adam Weldman. We're pro-truth with Johnny Depp versus Amber Heard. It says we're coming for you specifically. What does that mean?
Okay, yeah. So what's interesting about that is there were certain people who were covering this trial from the beginning, like that umbrella guy. He is a YouTuber. He's also on social media. They named him specifically by name 6 times throughout this trial. Amber's lawyers kept bringing him up for some bizarre reason. Laura B was one who was, like myself, attending in person and reporting on this. And so for some reason, they decided we're going to latch on to these people. These people are getting a lot of views or whatever. And they spoke to Johnny Depp's attorney. You know, when he was on the stand, Adam Waldman, they asked him under oath, did you talk to any of these YouTubers or whatever? And he said, yes, because the mainstream media was not interested in hearing our side of the story. And he said, I see these people as journalists, as independent journalists. And for some reason, the mainstream media flipped out about that specific statement he made when he was testifying that, yes, these people could be considered journalists as well. And so I talked to them. I gave them quotes. You know, they were willing to hear me out and see my evidence and stuff like that. So they are very upset about that. They see it, I think, as an existential threat to their profession, their stranglehold on the narrative. This idea that, like, you don't have to have gatekeepers and special, you know, people that are assigned to tell you what to think. A regular person with a webcam, you know, with the ability to create a Substack and go down and cover something in person could be deemed a journalist. They don't want that. They want only them, only people who've gone to special schools and have special privileges should be allowed to be a journalist.
Okay, tee this up for me. What's this video we're about to watch?
Okay, so here they're going to be talking about the online safety bill that they're pushing for, the Public Bill Committee in the UK, where they want to have exemptions for what they're calling journalistic content, because they say there are loopholes that allow harmful and hateful actors to spread harm on social media. And you know how vague that is. This is like Orwellian talk.
Okay, Christina, let me know if you can't hear it, okay? Because I am in my remote jungle studio, as you can see from the background. So I'm hoping it's going to work. Let me know. Here we go.
Content of democratic importance and journalistic content. What's your view of these measures and their likely effectiveness?
I'm happy to kick off. Yeah, so I think these are both pretty dangerous clauses that we are very concerned about. I would probably be kind and say unintended consequences, but they are loopholes that could allow some of the most harmful and hateful actors to spread harm on social media. If I take journalistic first and then move on to democratic, at first there are a number of companies, and it was mentioned in the previous evidence session, that there are outlets that could, with just adding a complaint system to their website, they could be a news, a media publication. There's a far-right outlet called Urban Scoop that's run by Tommy Robinson. They just need to add a complaints system to their website, and then they would be included as a journalist. There are a number of citizen journalists who specifically go to our borders to harass people who are seeking refuge in this country. They call themselves journalists. Tommy Robinson himself calls himself a journalist. And these people have been specifically taken off platforms because they have repeatedly broken terms of service of those platforms. And we see this as a potential avenue for them to make the case that they should return. But we also see mainstream publications falling foul of terms of service of social media companies. If I take the example of the Christchurch massacre, social media companies spent a lot of time trying to take down both the live stream of the attack in New Zealand, but also the manifesto of terrorists. But those were then put on the Mail, you could download the manifesto straight from the Daily Mail website, and the live stream was on the Daily Mirror and the Sun's website. We'd now be in a situation where social media companies could take that down from anyone else, but wouldn't be able to take it down from these news media organizations. And I don't see why we should allow harmful content to exist on the platform just because it comes from a journalist.
So then who gets to, I mean, so basically he's saying these people shouldn't be included as journalists, and then even if you are included as a journalist, you still shouldn't be able to put stuff out there. So
that we don't like, or that we say is harmful or hateful or bigoted or whatever. Like,
right.
What does that even mean? It's so vague and impressionistic in its speech. It's, it's just one of these Orwellian things of they're going to decide who is, a journalist. And as you said, they keep using this like boogeyman of like far right. Oh, they said citizen journalists. They don't like that. Oh, citizen journalists are taking cameras and they're going and filming what's happening at the border. They call that harassment or something. But gee, I thought that used to be called doing the news, showing people like events that are happening in real time.
Yeah. Yeah, we've talked about this before, how they see the outsider as targeting or bullying, but when they do it, it's just journalism, and who cares if your feelings are hurt, if we ruin your life. That's just the consequence of doing journalism. But if you ruin their life by calling them out for something fair, that's bullying them or targeting them. Or even if you don't even ruin their life, you just accuse them of something and it causes people to tweet mean things about them. That's bullying them. It's a total double standard for sure. So, okay, this is from Vox. The Me Too backlash is here. Johnny Depp's legal victory and the death of Roe v. Wade are part of the same toxic cultural movement. So
there you go.
What?
For some reason, only a Vox journalist is going to come up with like a connection between like the Supreme Court's Roe versus Wade leaked draft opinion and what happened with the Johnny Depp case, and somehow claim there's like a connection here. It's a conspiracy, a toxic cultural movement. But, so they can be conspiracy theorists too. They can take unrelated things and claim there's some shadowy connection. And that's fine when they do that. That's not conspiratorial. It's just nonsensical because they have to politicize everything. I think they have to make everything this like nationwide ideological thing. And they have to make it like a crusade or something. They really, I think, see themselves as, and you heard in that video, democracy, these defenders of what they call democracy. What does that mean anyways? First of all, isn't democracy simply mob rule? Okay, we're a constitutional republic, but even so, when the majority of people disagree with them, they'll find a way to somehow say, well, they're wrong or whatever, and so we still need to do something that even though most Americans don't want to do it or whatever, they don't see violating that as being undemocratic, trying to change the will of the people. It's okay when they do it.
Right. Yeah. It says every wave of feminist activism is greeted by a backlash, and that the reaction leaves us with our legal system that seems to be on the brink of recognizing neither women's right to control their bodies nor women's right to speak about the violence that has been done to their bodies. But
what?
Yeah. I mean, basically, this verdict is as much as to say that anyone who says the phrase "I was abused" can be sued as a liar. And it's
you can't lie. I mean, if you weren't abused and you claim that you were, like, you should not be able to lie and defame people. Like, that's not how this works. It's called due process. Like, if you're going to level very serious criminal allegations against somebody, like, you might have to back those accusations up.
Yeah.
And it's just as somebody who has watched all of the testimony through all 6 weeks, I saw all of the evidence. It is not just that she claimed she was abused. She provably lied. Every little statement she made where she said that she had 2 black eyes, hair ripped out and stuff, there are pictures and videos of her from the next day, the very same day, where you can clearly see that isn't the case. But you're not supposed to believe your eyes, I guess. You're just supposed to believe what Amber is saying and not 10 other people who contradicted her, some of which was her own friends. It's just stunning. Like, there was one point she claimed that Johnny Depp had kneeled on her back and she was terrified that there were going to be bruises, because this was in Japan. They were going to the premiere of his film Mordecai. Well, she wore a backless dress. There are pictures where you see not one mark on her. But don't believe that, I guess.
Yeah.
Don't believe your eyes.
What is Vox trying to say, though, that you shouldn't be able to, like, push back on somebody who's making false allegations against you? Like, they're still, I don't know. It's just, is that what they're saying, that's what this is? Like, so that basically they just don't believe the verdict, or is there a way that they're able to twist the verdict into still supporting the case they're making?
They don't believe the verdict. They now claim that the jury had to have been influenced by toxic social media. So they're saying that they don't believe the jury followed the very clear instructions they were given not to look at any news on this, any YouTube content or social media stuff. They were not sequestered, but they were given very clear instructions. Do not go look at this stuff because it can influence your decisions. They're basically saying, well, that the jury must not have listened, and they must have been influenced by these toxic people online. And that's why they came to this conclusion, not the mountain of evidence that showed she was lying that anyone could see.
And so that's where this call for more censorship then comes from, because of the toxic culture online. Okay.
Yep.
So this article, Why the Depp Heard Trial is So Much Worse Than You Realize. I love it when the media tells us things are worse than we realize. Amber Heard is just the first target of a new extremist playbook. That's our favorite word, extremist. Yeah, so the media has covered the degree to which this trial has served as a referendum on the Me Too movement and a siren call to domestic abusers. So they're arguing that that the narrative of the trial has been shaped in part by what appears to be an army of bots spreading rhetoric favorable to Depp. One researcher found more bots favorable to Heard, but said most of the bots were from third-party apps trying to capitalize on the trial. Meanwhile, they found the highest pro-Depp bot post was shared nearly 20,000 times. The work of these bots has been further amplified by, quote, men's rights activists, the part of the far-right-leaning extremist manosphere that seems to have decided discrediting Amber Heard is the key to destroying every woman who accuses men of abuse or domestic violence.
There's literally no evidence to back that up. And this actually came out during the trial. They brought in social media experts to say, oh, look, you have people online sharing hashtags like Justice for Johnny Depp, hashtag Amber Turd, hashtag Amber Heard is a liar, Amber Heard is an abuser. And they were trying to say that this was somehow like illicit bot activity. And Johnny Depp brought in an expert that was like, no, you have no evidence that shows any of this is done by bots. You're just making that allegation. There's really nothing to back it up. And is it so hard to believe that people just don't like her, that they listened to her testimony, they looked at her so-called evidence and decided for themselves that she was lying? It's like this inability to believe that people simply looked at what was going on, didn't like it, and decided to share an opinion about it and use hashtags.
There are a couple of comments, one on ROKFIN and one on Locals, about why is this getting so much media attention. And one person was saying, like, this is getting more attention than Assange. It's terrible. On both sides, it is getting like like the people who are pushing back on the just believe all women ethos that we've been living in for the last decade, I guess, or a little bit less than a decade. And then also like the Vox side of things. Why do you think?
I think part of it is because Johnny Depp is a very well-known actor, and I think he does have a lot of kind of hardcore fans. And I think that the fact that this was live streamed made it so that anyone around the world could tune in and literally watch it all day long and see the justice system playing itself out, right? We were able to watch it. We had a window into how this is going on. And I think that that was a big thing that people wanted to see. There are a lot of people who have a really strong sense of justice. So one way or the other, whatever side they were on, they had a window into watching this thing play out over weeks. And I think also that a lot of people can relate to situations like this. There are probably a lot of people, even maybe people listening right now, that have maybe been in toxic relationships or, abusive relationships, and maybe felt like they related to Amber or they related to Johnny Depp, and for some reason, wanted to watch this. But then I think on top of that is the fact that the media loves a circus. I think they're dying, quite frankly. And I think that they love anything that can kind of get them attention. I do think that there is a grift around it. Like, there were probably a lot of people, content creators, who saw, hey, a lot of people are tuning into this thing. If I start making videos about this, I might be able to up my subscriber count or whatever. I think that that's sort of another part of it. So I think there's a confluence of things, but I think that especially for people who are sick of this believe all women thing, the Me Too thing, I think it was important for them because there's an entire legal system. I worked in family law that is very deferential to women, that is very favorable to women, whether that is in divorce. Let's be honest, live in a world where a woman can marry a man. They can be married for maybe 2 or 3 years. She can divorce him and take half of everything he's worked his entire life for. I think that men are very upset with what they see as sort of an injustice in the legal system and unfair treatment to them. And I think they looked at this and saw, here's a man who is standing up to a woman like this, a toxic woman who was trying to ruin his life. And that's really what she was trying to do. And I think a lot of people, for some reason, that just resonated with them.
Right. From the fascination of the establishment, it's like they see the probably natural and organic reaction to a world they have in large part created as like, look at these extremists, and they rarely sit back and go, damn, did we do this? Did we create a world where all these people are so pissed, where they feel like they're constantly labeled one thing or another thing, or just completely stereotyped and steamrolled over, and maybe like we've played a part in all this. Like, I remember when Trump was elected, and all these people were freaking out, like including in my newsroom, and I was sitting there thinking, where are the people asking, like, how did he get elected? Like not. Like, I always thought, like if you hated him, he's not really your problem. It's a fact that a lot of people saw him as a solution to whatever problem, a lot of you guys were pushing, and you were creating this world that all these people felt so disenfranchised for whatever reason, that somehow he represented the large hammer that was going to smack everybody back down. Now, of course, you could debate all day whether that in fact was really what happened with his presidency. But I think that, instead of just like either looking at him and like blaming, like, because that's what they would do, just pick him apart constantly. And it's like, well, your issue is not really him so much as it is all the people who voted for him and felt like he was going to be the solution to the problem. Why do they feel that way? Like, what's going on? And instead of they see that as like, that just like grew out of a bubble, like in some black hole, not because of what a lot of these people who are pulling the strings, the puppeteers, have helped create. And I think it's the same in this case. It's like, once again, focusing on how these crazy people have just gone off the rails again, instead of any self-reflection about how it's a reaction to an ethos that they have created. And like, look at this article: men always win, survivors sickened by the Amber Heard verdict. I mean, it's like, how do you go to trial anymore? We've talked many times, no matter what the case is, on how screwed up the judicial system is for many reasons. But like, like if they got the verdict they wanted, they would not sit back and say, "Oh man, maybe we really screwed over Johnny Depp because we pushed."
Exactly.
It's just they get that verdict that goes against them, and then all of a sudden it's because of all these other reasons, not because a jury could have potentially come to a conclusion that was correct based on the evidence. And like, this has happened in other cases where people have sat back on, the opposite of sort of the media side, saying the jury was just influenced, or the judge was influenced and pressured, but because of national media attention, there would be rioting and there would be this if they didn't choose this way. And the media is like dead silent on that and says that's crazy. But then when a verdict like this, they're the first people to say that the jury pool was tainted, the verdict was tainted, and it's just because men always win or whatever else.
Yeah, exactly. They didn't say anything about, there was undue pressure leveled in the Derek Chauvin trial where he went to prison, for life. Like, they never said anything about how their coverage nonstop talking about that.
Or January 6th, like we've talked about before,
yes.
right? Like that,
Oh
that
my
situation
God.
would never in a million years still be the way that it is, with those people not having even seen due process if it hadn't been for the way the media has covered that.
And continues to cover it and use inflammatory words like insurrectionist and all this other nonsense. No, 100% correct. It is absolutely bizarre. And that headline is a lie. Men don't always win. If you know anything about family law, but again, these are journalists, they are not legal experts, but they feel that they can opine on these things. That is not true. Men do not always win. Oftentimes they lose. They lose custody of their children. They lose, half of their assets, maybe even their home. No, men don't always win. It's ridiculous.
And okay, so this is a quote from the Rolling Stone article. This is basically the end of Me Too. Dr. Jessica Taylor, a psychologist, author of 2 books on misogyny and abuse, tells Rolling Stone, it's the death of the whole movement. That's what you're saying. It is the death of Me Too. And then Rolling Stone goes on to write, as the verdict came in, sexual assault survivors expressed their disappointment with the decision, even if they were not surprised by it. Quote, I don't think it's unexpected, but it's horrible. This person saying that she's a survivor, faced a defamation claim after coming forward. She says the claim was dropped, but that watching her be dragged through the mud during the trial brought back memories of her own experience. But it's like, but it worked in your case, right?
Yeah.
The defamation, they dropped it because probably you were telling the truth.
Exactly.
And
so the system worked. Like,
right. So it's like, and then the other thing I don't really quite understand about this either is that, I don't know, man, if there's a cause that like I feel like is being hijacked to the extent that now no one believes something that I feel very passionately about because it's been hijacked by people who are like, no, it's always this case. The last thing I would want would be for like that to continue. I would want there to be a correction in the system so that it's like, it's not just about social pressure or a political movement or an establishment narrative or whatever else. It's just because facts are facts. And like, I'm always curious about the people who are in these categories, like in this particular case, like this woman saying that she's a survivor of domestic violence, or somebody else, just any number of the sort of movement. Like I would sit back and say, stop, like Felix Montano, I bring him up a lot, my friend who fled Hollywood. He talks all the time about the backlash that has come with like Pride, for instance, like or like drag story hour or stuff like that, where it's like, hey, we don't want to be a part, so it's like, if it just gets hijacked by people who are like, you always have to agree with this perspective on this topic every single time, otherwise you're a pro-misogynist, pro-domestic abuser, pro-racist, pro-homophobe, pro-whatever, then eventually like people realize that that's just ridiculous, and then you get a swing of the pendulum where people are like, I don't want to hear it at all. Like, if everything's racism, nothing's racism. If everything's domestic violence, nothing's domestic violence. Nothing's on fire. If everything's always on fire, why don't you hear more people say that?
No, you do though. That's the thing. They just aren't talking about it. For as many people.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and they'll be silenced now by the what was the bill we were talking about earlier?
The online
bill.
safety bill. Yeah, exactly. They'll be silenced by the online safety bill. For as many people that are, survivors of DV and SA that are saying, oh, this is a setback, this verdict, there are 10 times more who are saying, no, the right thing happened. Due process is important. And what she did by lying and fabricating claims, what she did was a setback for these people, not the verdict. The verdict was correct. There are tons of those, but where's the Rolling Stone article on that? Survivors come forward and say Amber Heard set them back 10 years or whatever. You won't see that article because it doesn't go along with their official narrative,
Hey, Christina, somebody was asking about, let me just go back to it on ROKFIN. The lawyer, let's face it, the lawyers always win. I'm trying to
so
scroll
true.
up and my internet is having, okay. Sussman. Does that name ring a bell? I'm sorry if that makes me really stupid. What about Sussman? Nancy asks.
Okay, so Michael Sussman was an attorney working for Perkins Coie, who during the 2016 Russia collusion hoax went to the FBI with claims about the Trump organization having a secret back channel communication with Vladimir Putin in Russia through an Alpha Bank server. Rodney Jaffe was a tech executive. He worked for Newstar. He was part of that as well. He was actually working as a confidential human source for the FBI while he was a tech executive, incidentally. And Hillary Clinton in her campaign, according to Robbie Mook, her own campaign manager, he testified. This is part of the Durham probe, by the way, for people who are unfamiliar. That trial ended and Michael Sussman was found not guilty by a DC jury. Half of the jury was Hillary Clinton donors. One of the jurors had a daughter who was in school with Sussman's daughter, but somehow this was allowed to go through. Judge Cooper is an Obama appointee. But anyways, regardless, Robbie Mook said Hillary Clinton approved the use of this story, the Alpha Bank story, to try to damage Trump and pushing it to the FBI. So I think what she's saying is, well, what does that mean? It was very clear from the evidence that Michael Sussman did engage in a criminal conspiracy on behalf of the Hillary Clinton campaign to funnel false allegations of Trump-Russia collusion and, in fact, fabricate and manufacture them, because that's what they were doing with the DNS server logs. They actually fabricated them and took it to the FBI. And one guy, Jaffe, who was working with Michael Sussman on this, he is currently under investigation by John Durham still. But he was also involved in the DNC Russian hacking attribution with CrowdStrike, which claimed that, yes, the DNC servers were hacked and it was Russia. He was part of that. And we know he fabricated DNS data to claim there was some nefarious link between the Trump organization and the Russian government through this Alpha Bank server. They also talked about these Yoda phones or something, a Russian cell phone service. This is when they were spying, by the way, on the office of the presidency. So they continued this. But the problem is that for some reason, John Durham tried to say that the FBI was fooled by the Hillary Clinton campaign and people like Michael Sussman, Mark Elias, Fusion GPS. They were not fooled. They knew they were part of the conspiracy. I mean, one FBI agent testified that the director, the 7th floor of the FBI, so that's the main leadership, people like Andrew McCabe, James Comey, Peter Strzok, they were very excited by the Steele dossier, in particular, the Alpha Bank allegations, even though another FBI agent had already basically just looked at it and said that these are fake. These aren't real. They ran with it anyway, so they were not fooled. But at the end of the day, the question becomes, these cases are being tried in Washington, D.C. It's 90% Democrat. You have people on the jury that are Hillary Clinton donors whose children go to school with Michael Sussman. How is that fair? How is that going to be a fair trial? That is not how it's supposed to work. That should have been considered a conflict of interest. So I think their question is very valid. What about Sussman? And that trial, by the way, only lasted a week. So you have Johnny, it's a good contrast. You have the Johnny
Right.
Depp salacious nonsense trial go on for 6 weeks, live streamed to the public. But you have the Sussman thing. This was an attempted coup of the presidency in 2016 involving the head of the heads of the FBI, the DOJ, the National Security Division, using like NSA data and sending out like CHSs so they could spy on like a presidential campaign. The biggest scandal in US history. It's a 1-week trial. It's not televised.
Mhm.
It's a really interesting contrast, I
Well,
think.
and yeah, and I mean,
you know.
it brings up the same point of how there's still that narrative. They would not say it was an overthrowing. They would say it was saving. Remember that, that article that came out? Wasn't that a Time magazine article? It was like how we preserved the democracy or saved the democracy
of course,
during this election. And like a lot of people read that. They're like, wait a second, are you like just straight admitting that you just stole the election? I mean, what, you know, so
to defend democracy, of course.
Yeah. I mean, So yeah, I mean, it's a really fascinating. I mean, it's just truly fascinating. I don't know what to make of it. I more and more that I hear this stuff, I think it's just not a logical battle. There's something going on up here, or like in the heart, like the spirit. I don't know, mind, spirit, psycho, spiritual. I have no idea.
Yes.
It's just not a facts thing, you know. Like I just feel like you're just talking to a wall sometimes with and I don't know what to make of it. I'm sure it's a lot of smarter people than I am, including yourself. And thank you. See, if you hadn't been on, everybody would have missed the question about Michael Sussman. So thanks. So again, another plug for Christina, Radix Verum on Substack. Go check her out. Okay, final thoughts on the connection between this verdict. Were you and would you include in your final thoughts? Were you surprised that it took this post verdict analysis has taken the turn towards calls for more censorship? Because I guess I didn't see that. But it sounds like you're. I am surprised. Like, I didn't think that was going to go there, but I guess you're not. So yeah, tell me, give me your final thoughts and what you think about that.
No, I'm not surprised at all. I mean, as far as my final thoughts go, I do think that the jury reached the correct verdict, and I think that I predicted too. I said, okay, if Amber loses, is she going to, have a redemption arc, if you will? Will she come forward and say, look, I was wrong. I've done some self-reflection. I should not have done the things that I did. I have these mental illnesses. I have borderline personality disorder and histrionics. I'm going to go get help for that. I'm going to go into therapy. I'm going to try to be a representative of people with these mental illnesses and rehabilitate my life. What I did was wrong. I apologize to real victims of SA and DV and take responsibility. No, I believed always that she would double down in her grandiosity, in the symptoms that she has. I mean, she represents them absolutely perfectly. If you know anything about histrionics, borderline personality disorder, and narcissistic personality disorder, she displays all of the symptoms. So of course she's going to double down. She's never wrong. If you listen to her testimony, at not one point did she ever admit that she did anything wrong. And I think that is why people disliked her so much. And I think it's why the jury could not find her testimony credible, because she could never admit to having made any mistakes, having done anything wrong, playing any part in the clearly toxic relationship that this was, where there seemed to have been mutual abuse. Johnny's maybe was verbal abuse, but it doesn't matter. It's still a pattern of toxic behavior. It takes two people to do it. And so I think that I predicted she would double down. The statement she released where she aggrandizes herself as this sort of oh, I represent all women, all victims, and this is a setback for everybody because people didn't believe me when I lied. And then the media, they never ever self-reflect. There's never a point where they think, maybe we got this one wrong, guys, and maybe the reason people are seeking out independent content creators, independent journalists, the alternative media, maybe it's because we keep getting it wrong. Maybe there's something we are doing by making everything a cultural issue, a national thing that maybe people don't like that. You know, of course, that's not going to happen. They have to double down. And that's what we're seeing. And now it's okay. If people disagree with us, they need to be silenced from the internet, and we're going to call it misinformation. So they're basically saying the jury was wrong. This is misinformation to say Amber Heard lied and fabricated and basically perpetrated a hoax, and a jury saw that and said she was wrong. It's the same thing with the, you know, what the FBI was doing with the Whitmer thing. A jury decided that the FBI entrapped these men. Did you see one mainstream media article saying we were wrong about the Whitmer case and here's why?
No.
You know, a jury decides that the FBI entrapped these people. No, they just double down.
And don't you think it's funny or odd or disappointing or sad or tragic or whatever that when sort of the outsiders question or react, it's undermining. Like in the same way, like we were talking about, you know, it's bullying if we go after the mainstream media, but it's journalism if they go after the
private citizens. They dox them, they smear them, get them fired for their jobs for memes.
Yeah, just what they have to do because they're journalists. You know, sorry, you're just collateral damage to the higher purpose of what we do as journalists. But if we do it, it's bullying. And in the same way, it's like they don't see themselves as undermining the judicial system or undermining the electoral system or any of these things.
Right?
When they do, they're mess. But if like somebody outside questions or has a reaction or has a YouTube video with a different take or whatever, that's undermining Me Too or what, you know, I don't know, man. Or like, with the election, if people are questioning election integrity or people are questioning the judicial system, like you're undermining it. But when they do it, they're not undermining it. They're just supporting Me Too, or they're just supporting domestic violence survivors or what, you know, whatever. It's like I said, it's just nuts. It's you know, I saw recently another reporter quit and tweeted about, you know, how undervalued and underpaid reporters are. And, you know, I was thinking about it, like just feeling like, you know, the business doesn't care, it just churns you out. And like, while I agree that the business doesn't care, I also don't necessarily think the vast majority of reporters really should be making any more money because it's terrible what they're doing. You know, like a lot of them are just really bad at their job. So it's like, you know, I don't think that somebody paying you more money is going to make you a better journalist or like make you a better critical thinker. It may attract people who, I don't know, or like, you know, screw this, I'm going to go do my own thing. I don't want to work in that business and, you know, be in a peanut factory for this amount of money. But, you know, it's interesting to me that even journalists who are disgruntled with the industry, they just feel like, you know, you guys just toss me aside and you don't care. You should, you know, pay me more or whatever. And I'm like, but do you see like the system itself, like that we participated in? Like, do you think the work you did should be valued more? I mean, look, it's terrible.
Yeah, you should be paid more for that.
Yeah, like it's like, you know, the service that we're rendering to the public at this point in mainstream media is. It's just, I don't know, in so many ways, so much of it is such crap that but it's just, once again, I just look at it like, yeah, but like if we just, I don't know, if we just looked higher upon reporters, like if we had a better esteem for them, if we promoted their you know, their reputations more, we just liked them more, we just gave them the respect that they deserve, then we would get a better product. It's like,
no.
Or, you know, you produce a better product and the respect.
And then you get, exactly. Then you get paid more. Then you get respected more. Maybe you got to earn that, right? Like it used to not just get handed to you because you have a shiny piece of paper from Columbia or whatever, right. You know?
Yeah. So I got to before we go, I got to tell you this funny story. I was going to post it on my locals page, but, you know, because it kind of fits. So I'm in Florida, right? Obviously visiting my family here. And yesterday there was a pink floaty tube, you know, like floating, and nobody was claiming it. I mean, it was floating out to sea. Okay. It was past the sandbar and I don't know, it'd been like out there for, at least we noticed it. Like by the time I swam out to it, 10, 15 minutes. Okay. Nobody was claiming. So I swim all the way out, like to get this thing, because I still care about the environment, so I don't want this plastic tube floating out there. Plus, it's a free tube, so I'm gonna go get it. So I swam all the way to Brienne. So I'm not on the sand, maybe a minute or two before this woman comes up to me and she goes, "That's mine." That's mine. It blew into the water, and yeah, and she's like, my kids want it, and I'm like, well, wait a second, you guys just let it go.
Yeah.
Let it go. And I gave it back to her. Of course, I said, well, I'm going to use that next time something floats ashore and a person gets it. I'm just going to go up to them and say, hey, that's mine. But it made me think about like this idea, like the journalist like yourself who's like, I'm going to go out and get the pink tube, like I'm going to swim, I'm going to do what it takes. And the person just walks up and like, I'll take that tube. Like that's
mine.
Two people, kinds of people in life. The person who swims out to get the pink tube and the person who complains comes up and like, give me the damn pink tube. But I just started thinking about that related to my old industry about how like, there's just, I don't know, there's just this lack of like self-reflection and initiative and just seeing clearly what's going on. Or just capitalizing on like whatever's gonna get a good point. Result.
How many of these mainstream media journalists went and attended in person?
Right. No.
And covered it all day, every day, lived and breathed this thing for the entire 6 weeks that this went on. We're watching it for 8 hours every single day, getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning to stand in line for hours to get a freaking wristband.
No.
None of those people did that, but yet they're going to opine on it. They're going to write these articles.
Tell you, you're wrong for your thoughts on it, or the jury that sat through the whole trial is wrong about it. It's just a reaction to pro-misogyny movements or something like that. Yeah, exactly. Like they know better.
It's so insulting. Yeah, they know better than the jury who sat there every single day and reviewed the evidence.
Yeah. Yeah, like I'm saying, the pink tube is like the AP wire. It's just like everybody takes the pink tube, and just recycles it. It's like, I'll just take that. Wait a second. I just swam out to get it. Wait, so, and then they complain that you're the extremist because you were willing to swim out.
Exactly.
Anyway, okay, Christina, thanks again. It's always a pleasure to have you on. Thank you, everybody who's watching live on ROKFIN. If you're watching this somewhere else, don't forget to join my locals community, alsamaro.locals.com. And it's super easy if you're on Rumble, but I don't have the link set up, so I can't show you the picture. But if you're on Rumble, it's just a little pink button in the top right corner. You can join locals. My editorial board meets every Saturday, and you give me feedback from the week before. Just pitch your ideas for the week ahead. It's a great place, a great community. Go support Christina, Radix Verum on Substack, and we'll see you next time.